In the heart of a quiet African village, respect was the language of love. Elders were honored, and every word spoken at the family table carried weight. But one evening, under the dim glow of lanterns, everything I believed was shaken. My daughter-in-law's words fell upon me like stones, stripping away years of dignity. It was the night my worth as a mother was tested, and my silence carried the pain of generations. What happened that night still lingers, not just as my story, but as a lesson for every family. I was born and raised in a small village, tucked between the golden fields of maize and the singing rivers of East Africa. Life there was simple, guided by traditions older than any of us. In our village, a mother's worth was not counted in wealth, but in the respect she carried and the children she raised. I had raised 3 children, and though life had tested me with the passing of my husband years earlier, I carried myself with quiet dignity. My eldest son, Kofi, was the pride of my heart. He was hardworking, strong, and carried his father's sharp eyes. When he brought his new bride, Abeni, home, the entire village celebrated. Weddings in our land were not just about 2 people but about families joining, spirits intertwining, and ancestors blessing the union. The drums beat, the dancers twirled, and I watched the joy on my son's face, silently praying that this new daughter of mine would honor our home. In the first weeks, Abeni was polite, quiet, and respectful. She would kneel when greeting me, as was our custom, and help with the household chores. She laughed lightly, carried herself gracefully, and the women of the village often praised me for receiving such a daughter-in-law. My heart rested with peace, believing the ancestors had answered my prayers. But as days turned to months, a subtle change began to creep into her behavior. It was nothing drastic at first. Sometimes she would forget to greet me, or she would roll her eyes when I reminded her of our traditions. She no longer asked me about the meals or sought my advice in the household. I dismissed it as youth, thinking that time and motherhood would soften her edges. Then came the whispers. A neighbor told me she had overheard Abeni speaking with her friends, saying that village customs were old-fashioned, that elders demanded too much respect, and that she wanted to live as she pleased. I did not want to believe it. After all, a young bride often struggles to adjust, and I thought it was my duty to guide her gently. Still, there was unease in my heart. I knew something was building. Like the quiet rumble before a storm. The turning point began with the announcement of a family gathering. It was Kofi's idea. He wanted to bring together his cousins, uncles, and neighbors for a great dinner, a night of celebration and togetherness. Such gatherings were the heartbeat of our village. Stories were told, wisdom was passed, and the young learned from the old. I was overjoyed. I began preparing days in advance. I cleaned the compound, polished the wooden stools, and made sure the firewood was stacked high. I pounded yam flour, roasted groundnuts, and prepared spices for the goat stew that would bubble in the iron pot. My hands worked tirelessly, but my heart was light. I thought, perhaps this gathering will bring Abeni closer to me. Perhaps she will see me not just as her husband's mother but as her own. On the morning of the gathering, the sun rose bright, painting the sky in gold. The air smelled of roasted corn and palm wine. Children ran barefoot across the compound, laughing and playing, while the women carried baskets of fruit and vegetables. Abeni, dressed in a fine wrapper of bright green and gold, moved gracefully through the yard. But I noticed her eyes aloof, distant, as though the work and traditions of the day were beneath her. She did not join me in preparing the stew, nor did she sit to cut vegetables with the other women. Instead, she stayed close to her mother, who had come to the gathering as well. Whispering and laughing together, still I held my peace. I told myself that respect is not demanded but earned through patience. I believed that if I kept my dignity, she would one day learn the value of honoring elders. As the lanterns were lit and the guests began to arrive, I felt a swell of pride. The compound glowed with warmth, laughter, and the aroma of food. The drums began their soft rhythm, children danced in the dust, and elders settled themselves with calabashes of palm wine. I sat quietly near the head of the table, my heart heavy with years of memories of my late husband, of the family I had raised, and of the traditions I had preserved. I did not know that the night would end with words that would pierce me. Deeper than any wound I had ever known, the evening sky glowed in shades of red and purple as the last of the sun sank behind the hills. The compound was alive with voices, laughter, and the clinking of calabash. Families from nearby huts arrived in colorful clothes, bringing with them bowls of roasted maize, cassava, and fried plantains. The air was rich with the smell of goat stew simmering in the iron pot, and the sweetness of palm wine being poured. The great wooden table, built by my husband years ago, stood at the center of it all. Around it sat uncles with wise eyes, aunties with warm hands, cousins with eager laughter, and children darting between their legs like fireflies in the night. This was the kind of evening that carried the soul of our people, unity, joy, and remembrance of all who had come before us. I sat near the head of the table, where mothers and elders usually sat. My son Kofi sat proudly beside his bride Abeni, his face bright with joy as he welcomed each guest. I looked at him and felt a quiet pride. He had grown into the man his father once dreamed he would become. Then my eyes fell upon Abeni. She sat tall and graceful, her wrapper shimmering in the lantern light. She smiled when her mother spoke, laughed when her friends whispered, but her eyes rarely glanced my way. It was as though I were a shadow in the place I once ruled. As the food was served, Abeni took charge with a confidence that surprised many. She lifted the calabash of palm wine with both hands, moving from guest to guest, pouring with a smile. The elders nodded politely, though some cast curious glances, for it was custom that such tasks be shared, that a daughter-in-law serve her husband's mother first before others. But when Abeni came to me, she did not stop. She walked past as though I were invisible, and instead poured a full calabash for her mother, bowing low and saying, "Drink well, Mama, for you are my true guide." Her words, though wrapped in sweetness, landed on me like stones. The chatter around the table softened for a moment, but no one spoke. Only the crackling of the fire filled the silence. I sat frozen, my hand still on the wooden stool. A wave of heat rose to my face, not from the fire but from shame. My chest tightened as though the breath had been stolen from me. I waited, hoping perhaps she would turn back, perhaps she would realize what she had done. But instead she moved on, pouring wine for others with laughter on her lips. When the meal was finished, plates clattered as the younger women carried them to the washing area. I rose slowly, intending to help, but before I could step forward, Abeni's voice rang out, clear and sharp. "You should rest now, Mama," she said to her own mother with a smile. Then, without looking at me, she added, "Let her wash the dishes. After all, the old must still make themselves useful." The words pierced through me like a spear. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The firelight flickered, shadows danced on the walls. But the sting of her words burned brighter than the flames. The table fell quiet again. Some of the younger cousins exchanged nervous glances, while the elders looked down at their bowls. My son shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between me and his wife, but no words came from his lips. I stood there, the weight of silence pressing on me. My hands trembled. My heart ached in ways I had never known before. For years I had carried myself with dignity, raising children, burying a husband, holding together a home. I had earned respect not only through age, but through sacrifice. And yet here I stood, stripped of honor in front of family, friends, and neighbors. I wanted to speak. My tongue pressed against my lips, but no words came. My voice drowned in the sea of humiliation. So, with quiet steps, I turned toward the dishes. As I washed, the cold water bit at my skin. Tears mixed with the soapy water, sliding down my cheeks unseen by most. The clatter of plates and the sound of laughter behind me felt like echoes of a world I no longer belonged to. That night, as the drums played and the village sang, my heart grew heavy with a sorrow I could not share. For the words of my daughter-in-law had broken me, and no amount of music or cheer could mend the wound. The drums faded into the distance, their echoes swallowed by the night. The lanterns dimmed one by one, until only the stars above kept their watch. The guests returned to their homes, carrying laughter and full bellies with them. But in my heart there was no joy, no music, no light. I sat on the wooden stool outside my hut, the night breeze carrying the smell of smoke and stew. My hands were still raw from washing the dishes, though it was not the water that had wounded me. It was the words. Words from the woman who was supposed to honor me as her second mother. Words that cut deeper than knives, sharper than spears. I thought of my husband, long buried under the great baobab tree. If he had been here, would Abeni have dared to speak in such a way? He was a man of respect, a voice of thunder. But he was gone, and I, his widow, stood alone to carry the weight of silence. That night, sleep did not come to me. Instead, memories rose like restless spirits. I saw myself as a young bride, kneeling before my own mother-in-law. I remembered the trembling in my hands, the fear in my chest, the determination in my soul to honor her no matter how hard the days were. Even when she scolded me, I bowed my head, because I knew one day I too would be in her place. And now here I was, in her place. But the respect that had been given to her was denied to me. Tears slid down my face. I covered my mouth to keep my sobs from waking the children. For the shame of being dishonored in public was heavier than any burden I had carried before at dawn. When the rooster crowed and the sky glowed faintly with light, I rose to fetch water from the stream. The path was quiet, lined with acacia trees and the songs of early birds. My steps were heavy, but walking gave me strength. Each footfall whispered a question. What is a mother's worth if not respect? At the stream, I found an elder woman waiting, her back bent but her spirit strong. It was Mama Afua, the oldest in our village. Her hair white as cotton, her eyes sharp as the eagle's. She looked at me, and without a word, she knew my heart was burdened. You have carried tears in your eyes all night, she said softly. I can see them even in the morning light. I sat by her side, dipping my hands into the cool water, letting the current wash over my fingers. My voice trembled as I spoke. She broke me, Mama, my son's wife, the one I welcomed as my daughter. In front of all, she called me useless. She poured wine for her mother but left me thirsty. She stripped me of my place, of my honor. Mama Afua nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the stream. Words are heavy, she said. They can build a house, or they can set it on fire. Last night, her words were fire. I lowered my head. But what am I to do? My son said nothing. The others stayed silent. I washed dishes like a servant, while she laughed with pride. If this is the way of the new world, then where is the place of mothers like us? The elder placed her wrinkled hand on mine, her touch warm and steady. Child, listen. Respect is not given for the sake of tradition alone. Respect is the breath of family, the bond between generations. If it is broken, the family weakens. But do not mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is the soil where wisdom grows. Her words sank deep into me, like rain into dry earth. Yet my heart still ached. How can I forgive when she cut me so deeply? Forgiveness, Mama Afua said, is not for her alone. It is for you. If you hold the wound too long, it becomes poison. Let her carry her shame, but do not let it eat you from within. Your silence last night spoke louder than anger could. In time she will remember. In time, she will feel the weight of what she has done. We sat in silence, the stream flowing between us, carrying away leaves, dust, and pain. The sun climbed higher, warming my face, and for the first time since that night, I felt a small flame of strength return to my chest when I walked back to the village. The children ran to me, their laughter light as feathers. My heart softened at their joy. For them, I knew I had to remain strong, but deep within me, I also knew this wound had not healed yet. And before it could, there had to be words spoken, truth laid bare, and a lesson remembered. Days passed after the gathering, yet the wound in my heart did not fade. Each morning I rose with the sun, tended to the fire, and swept the compound. I carried myself as though nothing had happened, but inside I was heavy with sorrow. The silence of that night clung to me like a second skin. Kofi avoided my eyes, though he tried to mask it with busy hands. He knew what had happened. He had heard every word, but he said nothing, perhaps torn between loyalty to his wife and duty to his mother. I did not blame him, yet the silence cut as sharply as his wife's words. Abeni. meanwhile moved about the house with her usual grace, laughing with her friends, helping her mother, and pretending as if nothing had passed. But I saw it, the flicker in her eyes when they met mine, the unease in her step when we crossed paths. She carried pride in her chest, but guilt sat like a stone beneath it. One evening, as the orange sun sank low and shadows stretched across the compound, I sat by the fire stirring the pot of yam porridge. The smell of smoke and ground pepper filled the air. My hands moved slowly, my heart lost in thought. It was then that Ebony approached. Her steps were hesitant, her eyes lowered. She knelt quietly beside me, not with the confidence she once carried, but with the trembling of a child. "Mother," she whispered, her voice almost swallowed by the crackle of the fire. I did not answer at once. The wooden spoon in my hand turned the porridge, round and round, as though the motion could calm the storm inside me. At last, I said, "Yes, child." There was a pause, then a deep breath. I wronged you." Her words came slowly, heavy with shame. That night, I let pride blind me. I honored my mother, but I dishonored you. I spoke words that cut where they should have healed. I thought only of myself, not of the respect you deserve. Her voice cracked, and tears slid down her cheeks. I see now the shame I brought not only upon you, but upon this family. Forgive me, Mama. Teach me, guide me. Do not turn your heart away from me. For a long while, I sat in silence. My heart wrestled with anger and love, pain and forgiveness. I thought of Mama Efua's wisdom, that forgiveness was not only for her, but for me. To free my soul from poison. Slowly, I placed the wooden spoon aside and turned to her. Her young face was streaked with tears, her hands clasped tightly as though she prayed for mercy. I touched her shoulder gently. "Ebony, respect is the root of our family tree. Without it, the tree withers. That night, your words stripped me of honor, and my heart broke. But you have come to me now, humbling yourself, and that is the first step toward healing. I will forgive, but you must never forget. For the respect you give to me today will be the respect your children give to you tomorrow." She bowed her head, her forehead touching the ground, a gesture of deep remorse. "I will not forget, Mama. I promise." Kofi, who had been standing silently in the shadows, stepped forward with tears in his eyes.
He knelt beside his wife, his hands folded in respect.
"Mother," he said, his voice shaking, "I too failed you that night. I should have spoken. I should have defended your honor. Forgive me." My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not from sorrow. I placed my hands on their heads, blessing them as my mother once blessed me. "Rise, my children. Let this be the night we rebuild what was broken. Let respect and love bind us again." The fire crackled as though the ancestors themselves bore witness. The stars above shone brighter, and in the stillness of the night, a weight lifted from my heart. Days later, we called another gathering. The family came once more, sitting under the same lantern light, eating from the same great table. But this time, Ebony knelt before me with a calabash of palm wine. She poured it with both hands, bowing low, her voice steady. "Drink well, Mama, for you are my guide, and your wisdom lights my path." The guests watched, nodding with approval. The tension of the past dissolved in that single act of respect. My heart swelled with quiet pride, not for myself alone, but for the lesson that had been learned. And so, the night that once broke me became the night that rebuilt us. For in every family, respect is not just a custom, it is the thread that holds the cloth of love together. And so, that night of pain became more than just a memory. It became a lesson. I learned that silence carries its own weight. But truth, once spoken, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. My daughter-in-law's words broke me, yes, but they also opened a door to understanding. Respect is not demanded. It is given freely, and love cannot grow where pride overshadows humility. Today, when I look at my family, I no longer see only the scars of that painful evening. I see the strength that grew from it, the forgiveness, the humility, and the quiet hope that the next generation will learn what we almost lost. That family is built not on power, but on respect. In the end, respect is the language every heart understands. Without it, even love loses its voice.